Won't turn your TV down. Meet my high-power remote. This was many years ago. When we moved to this city, we had a 14 by 70 feet trailer house. We moved here and set up in a fairly nice trailer park. I know, but we owned it, and it beat renting an apartment for a few years, while we looked at houses. The trailer next door was a rental, and a young couple moved in. The girl would walk around naked inside, and never pull the curtains on our side. But that is a different story. One day the guy and his friends muscled in this huge rear projection TV. It turns out he was quite the sports and movie fan, and turned the sound up to incredible volumes. It must have gone to 11. We didn't have AC, so had to leave the windows open, and it drowned out the sound from our own TV most nights. Edit for clarity, we did ask him numerous times to turn it down. I should have said so in the original post. Anyone remember Computer Shopper? It was this huge tabloid-sized magazine on newsprint, with loads of ads for electronics and computer stuff. There was this ad for a high-power universal remote. You set it for different brand TVs, with dip switches inside. I just so happened to remember the brand of this huge TV from the box, so I ordered it. It turns out, I could bounce its signal off a mirror in their living room, onto their TV. For a couple weeks, I would wait until a big play was about to happen, in whatever game he was watching, then switch his channel. If he was watching a movie, I would do the same. His cussing was epic. Apparently, he went and bought a new remote control, which was no cure. One day, he and his friends muscled the TV into a pickup truck to take to a shop. Of course, nothing was found to be wrong with it. It wasn't back for one day when I started changing his channels again, or turning the sound volume up and down, or turning the TV off. I don't think he watched a complete game or movie for quite some time. They moved out a few months later, and I had to seek new ways to amuse myself. Don't mess with my trash cans. My next-door neighbor is one of those people who believes he is the mayor of the neighborhood. We live on a cul-de-sac with only 7 houses. He'd berate people whose grass is taller than he feels it should be. He called the cops on me a few times if he could hear music playing outside, not loudly, and even during the daytime. The town deputy who came each time finally measured the volume level with a phone app and told him that it was under 50 decibels, and therefore permissible, and that he wouldn't come out again for the same complaint. The last straw for me was my garbage can, about 4 feet high, with 2 wheels, and a handle to move it up and down the driveway. It was put out every Wednesday night, and the truck came early the next morning to empty it. The neighbor decided he didn't like where I placed it. I take mine out at night, and started moving it when he brought his own can out in the morning. It's a small thing, but eventually I decided it needed to stop. I took a turd from my cat's little box and smeared it on the inside of the handle of the garbage can. It faced away from the street, with the handle on the street side. If you looked from the yard side, you could see little gobs on the inside of the handle. But, from the street side, it looked normal. Usually I get up a couple hours after the garbage truck comes by, but that day I was up early and watched from an upstairs window with a cup of coffee. Neighbor wheeled his can down to the end of his driveway, crossed the street, and started to move my can. As soon as H wrapped his fingers around the handle, he jerked his hands away, saw the brown goo on his fingers, and actually sniffed them. He then went totally ballistic, yelling obscenities I could hear from inside. Then he viciously booted my can into my yard, knocking out garbage bags, and then started kicking them, which scattered trash all over my lawn. He then went inside and called the cops. The same deputy arrived about 15 minutes later and spent another 15 minutes trying to calm him down. The neighbor pointed to the handles of the garbage can and kept screaming. He put poo there, and I got it on my hands. Eventually, the deputy told the neighbor to stay put and walked across the street to my house. I was already waiting at the front door when he knocked. He addressed me by my first name, since he had been called out before, and said, "Mr. Jones claims you rubbed feces on your garbage can, and he got it on his hands when he attempted to move it from the street." I, of course, had rehearsed my reply, and knew better than to deny the obvious. It's my garbage can, and I can do whatever I want to it, right? Plus, it was on my property, and he had no business touching it. The deputy was struggling to keep a straight face at this point. And, I added, he also tossed trash all over my yard, and I shouldn't have to pick it up. The deputy nodded and said, yeah, he did admit to doing that. The deputy told me to stay on my porch and walked back across the street to the neighbor, who was already asking what was going to happen to me. I couldn't hear what was said, but the deputy eventually escorted him over to my yard and watched as the neighbor picked up the trash and put it all back into the garbage can, that he had to stand back upright by grabbing the rim, not the handle. They went back to the neighbor's driveway, and the deputy quietly lectured him for a couple of minutes. I never had any issues with him again. I cost my neighbors over $100,000. My neighbors have 9 cars total, parked in the street. They always park 2 of those cars in front of my house, and won't move them the whole week. We have a regulation where I live that you can't leave your car parked for more than 48 hours in the same spot. My neighbors have a pretty big driveway where they can fit 4 cars, but it's always empty. They have told me they don't like to leave their driveway with cars because it looks tacky. Over half the cars they have, they don't even use. They just use them to save parking spots for themselves. In 2021, I noticed they were building a second unit. I'm on the back of their main house. I noticed that they completed the house in under a month. This raised some red flags because it takes anywhere from 2 to 3 months, with city inspections taking the majority of time. I submitted a ticket with my city through the app and advised them that there might be some illegal residential building without permits. I didn't think of it much until a year later. I noticed my neighbors tearing down their second unit last week. Word got around our block that a city inspector was there making sure everything was being torn down. Based on their materials and labor they put into their second unit, I cost them over $100,000. Neighbors used my property as their own, paid for new fence. I recently bought a house and have been having some work done before I move in. It was empty on the market for about 6 or 8 months before I bought it. One morning, I got a call from my contractor asking me about moving the cars in the driveway, and of course, I had no idea what he was talking about. I hadn't moved in yet. I left my job site and drove nearly a half hour to get there. As soon as I arrived, the people on the east side of me were walking toward the cars. I asked if they were their cars, and they said yes. They told me that they had been parking there for a few months, with permission from the owners. I informed them that I was the new owner, and they can't park there any longer. We went back and forth, and with the intention of being a good neighbor and trying to show some goodwill, I agreed to allow them to park there for a few more weeks until I move in, with the agreement that they would move them by 6 a.m. every morning. The rest of the week went by without incident. The contractor called me about scheduling a walkthrough on Saturday, and we set a time for early afternoon. When I arrived, there were 4 cars in the driveway and nowhere to park. The only on-street parking is 2 blocks away. I called them and asked them to move their vehicles, reminding them of our agreement. After 20 minutes, they finally came out and moved them. Speaking with them, they claimed to have misunderstood and thought our agreement only referred to weekdays and not weekends. I corrected them and moved on. Sunday morning, I grabbed a trailer and loaded some furniture to take over and store in the garage. Once again, there were cars in the driveway. I called them and got voicemail. I texted and said they had until a tow truck could arrive to get them moved. No answer. I called a tow company. 45 minutes later, 2 tow trucks showed up, backed in and hooked up to the cars. All of a sudden, the neighbors were home. They ran out to stop their cars from being towed, and it ended up costing them a little over $300 to get them unhooked. I called my contractor and asked if he knew someone who could put in a driveway gate, and he did. I let the neighbors know that they could no longer use my driveway. On Wednesday, I get a call from the gate installer telling me that there are cars in the driveway. I called them and said tow trucks are on the way. They moved. The gate was installed, and I went by to pick up the opener that evening. The neighbor husband came out to confront me, and I opted to just call the PD and deal with it legally. That Saturday, I went by to accept an outdoor furniture delivery and check on things when I noticed a towel beside the pool and a small kid's flotation device. My initial thought was that I just hadn't noticed it before, so I wrote it off and threw them both in the trash. On Saturday, the movers arrived with everything, and we began moving things in. About 7 p.m., my daughter and I left to go grab some dinner, arriving back at the house around 9:30 p.m. The neighbors were in my pool. They were hanging out and using my furniture. When I opened the door and began raising hell, they told the kids to go to the house, and the children ran to a corner of our fence and just walked through. They had cut out the privacy fence so it could be removed, and had been using the pool at their leisure for who knows how long. Again, I called the police and filed a complaint. The dad was arrested for trespassing, DPP, and an outstanding warrant, and the oldest boy, 20 male, for an outstanding warrant. I replaced the fence with a new one because they had destroyed the posts, runners, and pickets by removing and reinstalling the panel. Small Claims awarded me the total cost of 83 by 8 privacy fence, which came out to $3,800. The following Monday morning, around 5 a.m., their cars were parked in the street, where there's no street parking, so I made a phone call. They were gone when I left at 7 a.m. I haven't been paid yet, but I did notice a for rent sign in their yard this morning, so that's just as good. Good riddance. Edit. Update. 1. For those of you suggesting a security system, one was installed that next week, along with 6 cameras around the house, a Ring doorbell, and a fence around the pool itself to keep the dogs and my grandson out of it. I'll be closing and covering the pool in the next few weeks. 2. Met the owner of the house yesterday evening. The house will be empty by the end of the week. They were evicted for non-payment of rent, likely due to tow charges, and the husband not working, because he was incarcerated, where he remains. Warrant was for back child support. Wife apologized and claimed that she was told they had permission to use the pool. They didn't. 3. The material for the fence was purchased through my company account. I'm a structural engineer and commercial construction manager for a large local GC. Only 2 posts had to be replaced, and a handful of runners. The rest was just 8.1 times 6.5 pressure-treated pickets, which cost me $2.60 per stick, times 210 pickets purchased. The rest was labor and fasteners. So, altogether, about $900 for material and stain, $150 for a dumpster, and the rest went toward labor to finish it on a weekend. Fun fact, I'm also a property investor, flipper. Been in construction, commercial, civil, industrial, and residential for 35 years. Not my first fence, nor my first a whole neighbor. Before the paint experts jump on board, I know how long I have to wait before pressure washing and staining the fence. 4. The petty was only my twisting the knife by having their cars towed from the street when they weren't affecting me at all. Neighbor tells another neighbor to call the city, so they did. Happened a couple months ago, in our neighborhood. There is a pretty rundown house, with some inconsiderate neighbors. They have a large travel trailer that is too big for the driveway, and sticks out 1 foot into the sidewalk when it's parked. It's not an issue as there is plenty of room to walk around. But the kicker is they always park one of their cars halfway in the driveway, so it completely blocks the sidewalk. They live in a corner house, so it's dangerous for a family to walk in the street, around a blind corner, because the sidewalk is inaccessible. Multiple neighbors, including myself, have asked them multiple times to pull their car into the driveway or park it on the street to leave the sidewalk accessible. They always say they will, but nothing changes. Well, apparently they got into a shouting match with one of the other neighbors over it, with the offending neighbor telling the other neighbor if they don't like it, call the city. Well, the other neighbor did just that. City came out and wrote a ticket for the SUV blocking the sidewalk, and also wrote them up for the trailer that was too big to fit in the driveway, forcing them to store it in a rental space for $350 per month. Thanks for watching. I think the one neighbor, which got his neighbor's cars towed, got them arrested and evicted, can really be classed as petty revenge. That seems more pro-revenge style to me. What do you think? Tell me which petty revenge was your favorite in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos.